Hello everybody, this is Stephen Whitfield with Drilling Contractor. We are here on the stage at the 2025 IADC Health, Safety, Environment, and Training Conference in Houston, Texas. And literally 10 minutes prior to us filming this video here on this stage, the woman here in my side, Erika Gwilt of DEKRA, gave a presentation talking about SIF prevention and brains and all kinds of cool stuff like that. Actually, we did a video with Jim Spigner of DEKRA last year at this very same conference talking about the sort of connection between fast brain and slow brain and sort of the importance of understanding brain hazards. And you actually can take a look at that video. We'll provide a link to it in the description below. But here in this video, we're going to be talking with Erika about connecting all of that to actual SIF prevention, SIF being serious injuries and fatalities for those who might not be familiar with the term. We'll also sort of talk about human organizational performance, all kinds of cool stuff like that. So Erika, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure to be here.
So one of the slides that you presented here at this conference was a big graph about DEKRA's SIF prevention model. Now I'm not going to ask you to go over every single point on that graph. We probably will have some way for you to access that if you want.
Sure.
But can you just sort of give us sort of the high points about what makes up that model?
Sure. So our model really looks at three major elements. We start with data analysis and research, and that's the basis of all of our work. The one element of our model is about responsive focus. So this is taking a look at all of the things that have happened in your organization and learning from them. So this is looking at incidents, classifying for serious incident potential or non-serious incident potential, applying control actions, looking at the hierarchy of controls, doing deep incident investigations, learning from those incidents through a process of sharing best practices. That's the responsive side. And those are all important things that many organizations do well. That's not enough to really take us forward. So the second part of our model is the proactive set of activities. So we're taking that basis that we've laid with all of the response to incidents that have happened, and we're looking at integrating that knowledge into our systems. How do we look at all of the safety systems that we've got? And many companies are very sophisticated in terms of their pre-task risk assessment, their pause work authority, their safety governance, all of those pieces. We look at the integration of SIF prevention principles in order to leverage the things we know can help us with SIF prevention. We then look at something I talked about today, which was scheduled versus unscheduled SIF potential. Sometimes when we have SIF potential in a job, we know it's there and we plan for it. Other times, that SIF potential occurs at random. It's an upset condition, it's an equipment jam, it's a pedestrian wandering into the path of travel, and those things need to be responded to in the moment. And there's where we bring in some of the HOP principles that are useful to apply in controlling that type of SIF exposure. Yeah. So SIF prevention, serious injury and fatality prevention, is something that DEKRA really looked at, researched, and pioneered work in this area about a dozen years ago. SIF prevention is still something that companies are very interested in. They don't want to seriously harm people. What we've done is incorporate, with our brain-centered reliability group, some of those HOP principles into our SIF prevention work. So those are not two separate things, right? You can't do SIF over here and do HOP over here. You need to combine those to provide the best learning and the best outcomes and actions from both of those disciplines and processes. So in SIF prevention, when we look at some of those human and organizational performance, that focuses us both on the system and how we take a step back from the person and look at how the system promotes some errors, and we look at the person, frankly, and the way the brain is wired. As you talked with Jim about fast brain and slow brain last year, our brain is wired to deal with the world in certain ways. And most of the time, that's a positive adaptation of evolution. Some of the time, that can cause an error. It's not a purposeful, you chose to do this error. It's I missed that because my brain wasn't directing me to look for that type of hazard here.
It's interesting that you bring up, first of all, the scheduled versus unscheduled SIFs. We get this information, and you're talking about incorporating HOT principles into sort of actions, but I think our viewers would want to know, what do we specifically do with this information once we've made these classifications? These are all cool to talk about we've classified this and we're going to put these principles into place, but I think people want to know, like, what does that mean in terms of things that they do? So what do you do?
So depending upon which error trap you're falling into, there's some different strategies that we ask you to apply, whether that is intervening and speaking up when you see someone else doing something, taking a deep breath and pause. We teach some strategies. One is called the Be Sure strategy. It starts with, it's an acronym. So it starts with breathe, take a deep breath, right? Center yourself, energize, get centered and thinking about what you're doing. And then the next pieces of that are some strategies to look at the work, talk through what could happen, make sure that you're reacting to really what you see and not what's there. So we have a number of those strategies that we deliver to our clients based on, here's the brain-centered hazards, here's why people do some of the things that they do. Not because they're stupid, not because they're trying to mess things up, not because they made a conscious choice, right? It's the way their brain is wired that throws them into some of those traps. Mm-hmm. And then we teach some of those strategies. I talked about one in today's conference, the 3-level inspection, where we tend to look, our brains have us looking in the middle of the visual field for things that are moving, for things that are bright and shiny. So if we take a step back and break that visual field into segments and focus on each segment, we can see more, and therefore we can control more.
So I want to ask this question because, again, we talked with Jim last year about fast brain, slow brain. You brought up 7 brain hazards and things that we kind of need to know there. It's kind of a different way of looking at this. Mm-hmm. The connection between our brain's chemistry, our brain's functions, and sort of how we act on site, right? Why is it important for us to draw those distinctions, and what do we do with that particular information when we've sort of made the connections between our brain's functions and what that could mean in terms of, well, I don't want to say an incident, but I'll say it. It's something like that. Why is it important to know that?
It's important to know because we don't always recognize what traps we're falling into, right? We just don't see it, especially with routine work. We've done the same thing over and over. It's worked fine before. And so sometimes we miss something because we're in that fast brain, right? If it's something that, and this really resonates with the frontline worker. So I was in a group of roustabouts not too long ago. We were talking about the brain-centered hazard of fatigue. And I showed a picture of an MRI of 2 brains, one that was fully rested and one that had been kept awake for 24 hours. And you could see the difference in the blood flow on the colors of the MRI. There were all these red patches in that fatigued brain. That means that the blood's just not flowing. And this is what happens to your brain and why you have more errors when you're fatigued. And one of the guys stood up from the table and he said, "That's what I've been saying. That's what I've been talking about all along. We need to do." So now you have something that is recognized, that we know we need some strategies in place. That's one, fatigue, that is not completely under the control of the person, right? That's one where we need to look at scheduling, we need to look at shift work, we need to look at how we know people are adequately rested. So that's something where we need the leadership, the system, and the worker all to be working together on that.
Well, I guess this is putting a name to something that we already know, isn't it? That's the nature of this job, isn't it? We put names to things that people already know out there in the field.
Yep.
I would say that that's a very interesting thing. It's really cool to hear you talk about all this. Erika, thank you so much for letting us know about all this connection with the brain and SIFs, especially with an industry we're trying to be even safer out there and learn how to prevent incidents. This kind of understanding is really important. Thank you.
Great. It's my pleasure.
And thank you for visiting Drilling Contractor.